Hello and welcome to the Pilgrim Way. My name is Norman Graham and I'm a minister in the Baptist Union of Churches in Scotland. The aim of these signposts is to try and help to connect the text of the Bible with our everyday lives. Today I want to read from Exodus chapter 20 and continue our series on idolatry. Exodus 20 verse 1 says, "And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below." In our previous signpost, we considered the origins of idolatry in the creation story in Genesis chapters 1 and 3. We noted that many of the issues raised in those ancient texts are political flashpoints of division within most Western liberal democracies today. We also noted that a central issue of idolatry was not simply Adam and Eve's disobedience in eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Rather, it was that by doing so, they were claiming for themselves the right to define what was good and what was evil. A right that belongs to God alone as an aspect of the moral perfection of his goodness. By claiming this role for themselves, Adam and Eve were acting as though they were gods, and therein lies the root of all other forms of idolatry. We deify our own capacities and thereby make gods of ourselves and our choices and all their implications. The core issue of idolatry then is always the worship of the self. Adam decided that he knew what was better for him than God did, than that he wanted to advance himself at all costs, and that he trusted in himself, a created man, instead of his creator. In the introduction to this series, we noted that idolatry falls into three broad categories: the worship of creation, the worship of demons, and the worship of things made with human hands. It's that final category of things that we make that is by far the most common, though all of them are united by the common denominator that we human beings make things into gods. And that is the theme I'd like to explore today. So what are the things that we make into gods? Well, firstly, we can say that we make idols or gods of the things that entice us. To entice someone is to tempt or offer them something that will bring them pleasure or some kind of personal advantage. And both those things can be very wide-ranging. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, in a section dealing with idolatry, God says to the people of Israel, "When you look up in the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshipping things the Lord your God has apportioned to all the nations under heaven." A few years ago, I went hiking in the Yosemite National Park in California, and the views were incredible. Not just at Half Dome, but in every direction, wherever you looked, it was amazing. I could easily understand why people speak about having a spiritual experience when they're high up in the mountains. As theologian Christopher Wright notes, the language of Deuteronomy chapter 4 suggests that there are things in creation that are so awe-inspiring, so much beyond our reach and our control and our understanding, that they exercise an enticing attraction to us. Job seems to have been thinking along those lines when he said, "If I have regarded the sun in its radiance or the moon moving in splendour, so that my heart was secretly enticed and my hand offered them a kiss of homage, then these also would be sins to be judged for I would have been unfaithful to God on high." I think many people would say that some of the most memorable and awe-inspiring moments in their lives have been sunrises and sunsets. I've walked a few caminos in Spain, and I recently noted that a lot of my photographs from those walks are sunrises and sunsets. Probably because they're beautiful and, of course, very awe-inspiring. If we care to analyse our motives for going on holiday somewhere, in that mix would be in a way that certain places make us feel. Perhaps a sense of awe or a sense of peace and calm. I think our holidays are as much about chasing that feeling as they are about anything else. And that in itself is not a bad thing. But it doesn't take much for us to turn those things into idols. I'm 100% in favour of caring for the environment, and there are few things that I enjoy as much as going for a walk in the Scottish countryside or walking a Camino in Spain. However, it's a short step from admiring and appreciating creation to worshipping it in some way. And many people today have such a reverential awe of nature that they attribute to it qualities it does not possess. They see nature not only as sentient, but as a unifying divine intelligence that exists in all created matter. You hear people talking about how we're all cosmic dust, and when we die, we go back to the cosmos and all that kind of thing. It seems a bit far-fetched perhaps, but we just have to consider the popularity, for example, of the Avatar and Star Wars franchises. So far there have been 2 Avatar movies, with a third one due to come out later this year and others scheduled in the years still to come. Movies are not just entertainment, they are telling a story, and there is a point to every story, a philosophy that undergirds it, that drives it, a message that it's trying to convey. Historically, the main dialogue partner for theology has been philosophy. And many great Christian thinkers have engaged with the key philosophers of their day, even in the early centuries of the church. Christian thinkers like Tertullian and Augustine were engaged in a dialogue with the key philosophers of their time. The reason for that was that philosophy was the driving force that shaped society by shaping what people thought. But that's not the case now. In their essay Theology at the Rim of a Broken Wheel, theologians Richard Middleton and Brian Walsh suggested that by the 20th century, the problems of the world had become so interconnected and philosophy had become so specialised that it no longer addressed the big questions of meaning. As a result, philosophy no longer addressed the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. In their view, it's the artists, not the philosophers, who tell the world's story. And so they advocated greater engagement between theologians and the arts. And I think they were fundamentally correct. Even my own generation has been shaped more by music and film than by philosophers like Sartre or Kant or even Derrida, the postmodern mischief maker. If you don't know who they are, well, you're kind of making the point, aren't you? I think the medium of film is actually the most powerful storytelling, culture-shaping medium in the world today, which is why so many propagandists use it. Every movie has a message, and that message may be idolatrous, and therefore the culture it will help to shape will also be idolatrous. Every TikTok video has the potential to define and shape the lives and drive the lives of hundreds of millions of people worldwide. In the world of the Avatar movies, nature itself possesses a unifying intelligence called Ewa. It's a neo-pagan idolatrous concept known as pantheism, the idea that the universe is God. And it's everywhere in movies. Especially in Disney movies, actually, perhaps most obviously in Star Wars, one of the biggest money-making franchises in the world. The Force in Star Wars is exactly the same unifying intelligence as Ewa in Avatar, which was exactly the same unifying force in the computer game and movie Final Fantasy some 20 years before that. The worldview of Avatar and Star Wars and all the copies they have spawned is pagan and idolatrous, and they have influenced the worldviews of millions of people today. It's not uncommon today to, especially in movies, to hear someone talk about being helped by the universe in some way. You know, the universe knows what you need and all that kind of thing. Of course, it's not just creation that inspires awe and wonder. We look for and find it perhaps to a lesser degree in great sporting triumphs or rock concerts or the glare and power and greed of great cities. All of these can be enticing and idolatrous. But if we are looking for true splendour and majesty, strength and glory, they are only to be found in the presence of the living Creator God alone. There's nothing wrong with feeling a sense of awe at the marvelous wonder of creation, or even things that humans have made. The Mesquita in Cordoba is awe-inspiring. Works of art, great works of art, are awe-inspiring. But that awe should lead us to a sense of worship of the one who created it all, the one who made the universe, the one who gifted architects and artists with the knowledge and skills to produce their art. As the psalmist reminds us, the heavens proclaim the glory of God. Van Gogh's famous painting of Starry Night is amazing. It's awe-inspiring, and if you get the chance, go to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. It's incredible. But he's painting what God has made. And his painting what he wanted his painting to do was to drive people to that awe and worship of God, the one who made the heavens above. We also make idols out of the things that we fear. Psalm 96 verse 4 affirms that the Lord is to be feared above all gods, which suggests that gods other than Yahweh are indeed things that are objects of fear. The word used in the psalm suggests more than simply being afraid. It also conveys a sense of reverence, of awe, and of honour. Of course, that's not to say that we should not be afraid of God. It's for good reason that in the Bible, whenever people encountered an angel or found themselves in the presence of God, their first reaction was always fear. To be in the holy presence of God is to be aware of our own unholiness, and that should terrify us. It should terrify us, it would terrify us rather, if it were not for one thing. The fact that the Bible also tells us that perfect love drives out all fear. And God is perfect in his love for us in Jesus Christ. So fear can be a good thing. It helps us identify our true relationship with God, that we are not holy, that God is holy, that we are not God, that he is God. It alerts us to all of that. But it can also lead us into idolatry. It might seem odd to turn things that we fear into gods, but in fact humans have always done this, often in an attempt to placate false gods or ward them off by worship and sacrifice. There were plenty of gods in the ancient world when the Israelites were becoming a nation and when Jesus walked the earth. There's always been plenty of other gods. The Roman Empire in which Jesus lived was filled with a pantheon of gods. And all ancient religions, and many still today, have a number of gods that are depicted as fearsome, wicked, and cruel. It's certainly the case, for example, that the gods of the nations that surrounded Israel included the gods of war and death. Natural forces like the sea were also feared because of their destructive power, and sailors would generally offer their worship to sea gods in hope of placating them and gaining a safe passage. Many people in the ancient world, and many people still today, wear protective charms or have rituals and mantras that they practice daily in order to ward off evil. Worship driven by fear. In doing so, of course, they are making a god out of the thing that they fear. In case you're wondering, that's the historical background between the fashionable charm bracelets that many women wear today. Even if they don't realise it, those things are basically pagan in origin. They are effectively a modern take on magic charms designed to ward off evil and placate the gods. It's not incidental that the fear of the Lord has a central role in the biblical worldview. For if the God of Israel is the only true God, then he is truly the only God to be feared and given reverence and worship. In fact, as Christopher Wright notes, those who live in the fear of the Lord need live in fear of nothing else. Other objects of fear lose their divine power and their idolatrous grip. Psalm 34 says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you his holy people, for those who fear him lack nothing. You know, we're living in very dangerous times. The war in Gaza, Israel's war against the people of Gaza, could spill over to involve other countries still, has that potential. Many Western countries are helping to arm Ukraine in their fight against the Russian invasion, and Russia in turn is being helped by countries like Iran, North Korea and China. So in effect, these conflicts are already global. The impact of climate change is being felt all around the world as extreme weather events increase. We've not long come out of the COVID pandemic, although COVID is still around. But the experts in those fields are saying that, are telling us to expect another pandemic in the near future. That it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. These are the things that we fear, and we turn them into idols and do what we can to placate these false gods. But we also make idols or gods out of the things that we trust. Trust is generally a good thing. In fact, John chapter 14 verse 1 Jesus commands us to trust him, but trust can also be misplaced. I remember one preacher saying that it's not the bad things that keep you out of heaven, it's the good things. You put your trust, investments and all that are good. Money in the bank's good, but we put our trust in that to save us, and it won't save us in the end. Again, Christopher Wright has said we tend to idolize the things or people or systems that we place our trust in to deliver us from the things that we fear. The idolatrous dimension emerges when we place ultimate faith in such things, when we believe all the promises that are made or implied in them, and then when we make all the sacrifices that they demand in exchange for what they offer. So whether we aim at financial security to ensure against all future threats, or pour vast quantities of the wealth of the planet and its nations into the gaping maw of military security, immunity from ill health, to the wear and tear of physical aging, these tend to be very costly gods indeed. Of course, it naturally follows that since these false gods are very costly, that we feel cheated when they don't deliver what they've promised. And they never deliver what they have promised. False gods always fail. And having shown the futility of trusting in anything else, Psalm 33 counsels us to trust in the Lord alone. We wait and hope for the Lord. He is our help and shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. May your unfailing love rest upon us, O Lord, even as we put our hope in you. And lastly, we make idols or gods out of the things that we need. I don't want to say too much about this today because we'll be looking at it in greater detail in the weeks ahead. Suffice to say that for now, it's our natural instinct to make gods of the things that we need. Given that we live in an incredibly materialistic society, this idolatry is one that is very difficult to be unaffected by. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus commands his disciples, "So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them." We pay homage to the twin gods of consumerism and materialism to gain what we think we need. But Jesus commands a different approach. Again, in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." The answer to these idolatries, therefore, is to acknowledge the only true and living God in all of these domains. It's him whom we are to be in awe of. Him we are to fear. It is him alone we are to put our trust. And it is to him alone we are to look for all our needs. Thanks for listening.